Our Truth and Politics panel is here now, and this week we're looking back on the life and legacy of Bill Wilson and looking at U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to fully recognize the Lumbee Tribe in North Carolina. Here with me now are Jennifer Leywitz of Pasqua Harbor Strategies and Neegon Sinclair, a columnist with the Winnipeg Free Press. Neegon, Jennifer, thanks for being with us. Neegon, we'll start with you. Bill Wilson left us this past weekend. How do you remember him?
One of the very first Indigenous lawyers in Canada. Certainly worked with my father a whole lot. Of course, was there during the constitutional talks, was a Quaqua hereditary chief. One of the most notable moments I think that everyone remembers is this really pivotal moment between, at the time, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, who had this rather poor attitude when it came to Indigenous peoples throughout the entire constitutional talks in the early 1980s, and Bill Wilson constantly confronting him, quite forcefully fighting for Indigenous rights, Indigenous territory title. And then there was an interesting moment in which Bill Wilson introduced Jody Wilson-Raybould, which would eventually become the Attorney General in the Canadian government of Justin Trudeau, his son. And he introduces her to Pierre Trudeau, saying, "She would like your job." And I think Bill Wilson was known as a father, a grandfather, a very kind man. He certainly mentored me over the years. And I can remember as being a young 17-year-old meeting him for the first time and being struck by how kind he was and generous he was.
Jennifer, your thoughts on Bill's legacy?
My legacy when it comes to Bill Wilson is similar to what Neegon is saying. I think about, the pillars of reconciliation, advancement in this country, and the people that were at the forefront of it. And interestingly enough, when I heard about the passing of Bill Wilson, I immediately thought of Neegon's father as well, because when I think about the warriors before our modern government came in and attempted to wipe out our people, we traditionally had warriors before that time. And then as the evolution of government policy tried to change us and destroy us, we still had warriors emerging that did the work and put in that work, especially at a time when it wasn't popular to do so. I mean, when you think about Bill Wilson and the instrumental role that he played in enshrining Indigenous rights into our Constitution, and, even in modern day, to see his daughter go on and become such a powerful person and leader, it just shows that, our ability and resiliency has always been there, and so have our warriors. And I think he will definitely be somebody that we will feel the effects of his legacy for a very long time. And I think we see a lot of what he stood for in his two daughters as well. And I think we're incredibly lucky as a country to have both Corey and Jody. And to echo what Neegon had said about Bill, I can say those same qualities came out in Jody. I've met her a couple times, and she just epitomes kindness and respect and patience. So
good stuff. We're gonna move south of the medicine line now, and Donald Trump has been busy since taking office. One of the things he wants to do is grant full federal recognition to the Lumbee Tribe in North Carolina. Neegon, you've been looking into this. What can you tell us?
I wrote a column about this, and not to say shameless self-promotion, but if anybody wants to read a little bit more, it's a fascinating story. The Lumbee Tribe has come out and supported Donald Trump over the years. Those of you that know the history of Donald Trump and Native Americans, it's been very contentious. Certainly a lot of fights over casinos back on the East Coast. Donald Trump's been well known to say quite racist things about Native people, but yet he has a very strong indigenous constituency in areas like North Carolina with the Lumbee, but then also in Oklahoma, which voted overwhelmingly for Trump in the last election, which would have involved a lot of Native American voters. In the case of the Lumbee, this is a group of people who have, at times, certainly by the standards of the Eastern Band of Cherokee, who are the kind of major tribe of North Carolina, have somewhat complicated claims. That's my glass half full way of saying it. They come from a series of different groups of people, moved to urban settings. They have no real land base that other other than the ones that they self-identify, that is historically based in archives. It's a very complicated situation for the Lumbee. They received partial recognition by the federal government, federal U.S. government, over a century ago, but that inhibits them from receiving tribal funding, supports, recognition for their land claims, and so on. And this will offer to them land, but it will also be land that is claimed by the Eastern Band of Cherokee. And so the Eastern Band of Cherokee have opposed that recognition, and now what we have is 2 tribes in North Carolina who have now very significant, large population bases who will now be claimed.
I think we lost you there for a second, Egon. We'll go to you, Jennifer. And how do you think that this might affect other Native American tribes or even Indigenous peoples up here?
I think this opens up our conversation around that self-identification piece that Egon was discussing, especially I know in one of our last episodes when we were talking about this and how identity is more than just what you claim as your like ancestral ties, but your like sense of belonging. And, you know, even for me, understanding where I come from and the family dynamics and even the role that like my ancestors and family played in our tribe and what is now our nation. And I think when you just get into the modern context of people now, you know, with those claims that maybe are 100% verified or they keep changing, it really starts to put into question what that's going to look like in the future if we have more groups emerging that are coming from several different areas and basically claiming like sovereignty and autonomy and then wanting the same recognition of rights that tribes that have sustained the evolution of time for as long as they have are now essentially in competition with like emerging tribes and time, you know, and even right now when you hear of tribes that are speaking on behalf of Native Americans and supporting somebody like Donald Trump, that starts to bring in the conversation around, you know, like the violence and stuff that Native Americans can experience because one group is promoting it and the other are fighting against it. So I think that this is going to open up a much larger and more complicated conversation. But at the end of the day, I think it brings us back to the point of needing to really establish, you know, what those concepts and those mechanisms are for measuring who is Indigenous or in the United States' case, Native American and who's not.
Jennifer, staying with developments with the new president, the Mohawks of Ganawage are among those raising concerns about the ongoing back and forth over tariffs and the relationship between Canada and the U.S. So what's going on there?
It sounds like from what their press release said that I had just read, that basically Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asking them to join the fight. And it sounds like a lot of the nation is speaking from a place of wanting to assert their own sovereignty and be able to do it on their own. It did look like a direct attack towards the Prime Minister and the Liberal government, but at the same time, there's going to be tribes and nations across the country that are supportive of the way that the Liberal government is handling it. I know the AFN did release a statement regarding the tariffs as well, but I think this brings back the much larger piece of the puzzle that we are supposed to be in a nation-to-nation agreement, and so we shouldn't just be falling underneath our federal government, but be able to retain our sovereignty and have that conversation on how those tariffs affect, you know, not only Indigenous people in our nations across the country, but also Indigenous people that are getting into the realm of business and self-sufficiency and economic prosperity and the effects that's going to have on our ability to achieve that. So I think that we need to have a much larger conversation than just giving over our sovereignty to the federal government to handle it on our behalf.
Egon, another thing that's taking place this week, just yesterday, the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, which advocates on behalf of 63 First Nations in Manitoba, elected a new Grand Chief. Kyra Wilson from Long Plain First Nation is the new Grand Chief, the second female to be elected to Grand Chief there. Your thoughts on the election and the outcome?
Also the second youngest Grand Chief in history. The only one younger than now Grand Chief Kyra Wilson was Louis Stevenson, who was the first Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs back when it was the Indian Brotherhood of Manitoba. Back in the day, of course, a different set of politics than it is today. It is, I think, a good day when you see women who take over leadership and supported by men, supported by communities. Of course, all Grand Chief elections aren't really about democracy. They are simply about chiefs that vote for a spokesperson. And so we aren't really talking about the chief of Manitoba. We're talking about the spokesperson for the chiefs of Manitoba, 63 First Nations. So but I don't want to take a damper off very long achievement, long hard work by Kyra Wilson. Kyra Wilson, of course, famously was chief of her own community for a very brief time. Also was quite instrumental in the seconding. She was the second motion to remove Roseanne Archibald at the Assembly of First Nations. So certainly she's been involved in a lot of politics for quite a long time. She's also been a strong advocate for murder missing Indigenous women and girls, and been a big person who's been quite strong on the file of child welfare. So congratulations to Grand Chief Wilson. I think there was a great deal of energy and good feeling at the Assembly Manitoba Chiefs gathering over the past few days. I know certainly the majority of chiefs did support her, and she won on the first ballot. It was certainly something in which there seems to be a lot more uniting from the Assembly Manitoba Chiefs than there has been over the past few years, going all the way back to the removal of Arlen Dumas. And Kathy Merrick certainly brought some of that together. The hope is that Kyra Wilson will be able to rejuvenate what has become an organization which is really struggling with relevancy in Manitoba.
Niigaan, Jennifer, we'll leave it there for this week. Thanks to you both as always.
Yeah, miigwech.